Hello and welcome to the Bethlehem Icon School online. In today's session we're going to be taking a look at garments, and I hope that after a little bit of instruction you'll be left feeling much more confident and able to draw icons with real spiritual elegance.
Our Holy Fathers and Mothers, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy upon us. Amen. Glory to thee, O God, glory to thee. O Heavenly King, the Comforter, the Spirit of truth, who art everywhere present and fillest all things, treasury of blessings and giver of life, come and abide in us, cleanse us from all impurity, and save our souls, O good one. Kudus on Allah, Kudus on il-Kawi, Kudus on il-Azilaya multul hana. Kudus on Allah, Kudus on il-Kawi, Kudus on il-Azilaya multul hana. Kudus on Allah, Kudus on il-Kawi, Kudus on il-Azilaya multul hana. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, both now and ever, and unto the ages of ages. Amen. We say together, Most Holy Trinity, have mercy upon us. O Lord, wash away our sins. O Master, pardon our iniquities. O Holy One, visit and heal our infirmities for thy name's sake. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, both now and ever, and unto the ages of ages. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Amen. Kyrie eleison, 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 Kyrie eleison. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, both now and ever, and unto the ages of ages. Amen. Amen. Saying, I'm going to be trying to introduce you to the principles behind how garments are made. So I'm going to just begin by showing you a little document. So you should see there the Bethlehem Icon School Icon Painting Manual, which I'm in the process of sort of revising and editing and producing. So a little session on garments. When you look at icon, the garments are one of the things which are the most distinctive about the what you might call the style of iconography. Get the garments right, and you produce something of great spiritual elegance. Get it wrong, and it can really look very clumsy. The style with which you do it has to be something based on nature, but it's got to reduce it down in an intelligent way to something that's a little bit more abstract and less sensual. Now, if you've looked at a Roman statue, for example, and I have an example here. So this is in one of the Vatican museums, and you can see here classical Roman statue. And those of you who know a bit about icons, that posture is really highly reminiscent of the sort of posture you'd have as, say, one of the evangelists, like St. Luke. Now you can see behind me on the wall, just behind my head if I move across, can you see St. Luke there? You can't see his head, but you can see he's holding the gospel book, and he's got that sort of classical pose. You see the connection. So early Christian art, very much based itself around some classical models. And during the history of icon painting, there's a sort of tendency to go either closer to that classical tradition or more and more abstract. So in the document I was just showing you, there's a sort of naturalism, there's an abstract, and then there's the ethereal. So here are 3 examples to illustrate that. So you can see the one on the left here, the Sinai from the late 11th century, is very, very close to how garments look in nature, as they did on that statue. They're soft folds, they nestle into each other. You've got a very gentle, subtle highlighting. You feel that that's cloth, that you could touch it, and you can feel how it's hanging. So there's a sensuality to it. However, it's not exactly as it would be in nature. It's being simplified, it's being reduced in some sense in terms of volume. If you look at the folds, for example, there's no, even these you see on that veil, you can see here those folds, they're somewhat flattened. They're not as rich and sensual as, for example, you would see in a Baroque piece. Now, if you look at the next one across, the Ochrid Annunciation angel, that very famous one, I'm sure you've all seen this. Can you see how those folds have become much more abstracted? They're sharper. It's not that it's like sheets of metal, but it's definitely not something where you're feeling the softness of the cloth. So your senses are being passed over, should we say, a little bit. It's really trying to take you into what's being represented here, to the figure of the Archangel Gabriel, who is truly present as you're gazing at this image. So don't get stuck on the image, go through it. And then finally, the one on the right-hand side from Transfiguration icon from the Moscow school of about 1403, so about a century later than the Ochrid one, everything has been reduced down to basically shapes created by lines. So if you see the shoulder, it's literally that curved line, and then the shape of the highlight. There's almost nothing else there. And likewise, you look at the leg, you see how there's these lines here showing how it's folding, but they are so minimal that it's almost as though it's vanishing. And that sense is also increased by the use of translucencies and the way in which the highlights are working to give you the form, again, in the most minimalist of ways. So here we have 3 classic icons, very famous pieces, all 3 of them sublime in their quality, and 3 totally different approaches. So you can see that if you compare the Ochrid Archangel with the garment of Moses, you see how it's become much more abstract. It's lost more and more of the softness, the gentleness, the softness and feel of the cloth. And instead is this very dramatic creation of folds with the idea of responding to the idea that there is this light, this electricity of divine light coming through the figure. So the classical ones tend to have more of a gentle radiance, whereas the more abstract you go, the more it becomes more electric. So then if you look at the Moscow figure from the Transfiguration, you see how those abstract shapes for the highlights are giving, it's reduced to that really to give it form. So it's got no shadows in there at all. Whereas if you compare the Ochrid one, you can see the shadows, see behind the knee there, and where behind that taut cloth there, you see the shadows are really quite pronounced in that. Whereas if you look at this one, here there is a shadow area, it's darker, but it's not a dramatic use of shadow. It's merely there to give the minimal amount of form, so that the emphasis is really on this sort of transfiguring light. Okay, so I hope that's beginning to make some sense. Now, what I want to do is to take the middle angel and use that as an example of how to understand how clothing is done, because whether it's the classical or the ethereal or the abstract, they all are true to the basic principles of drawing and of human anatomy. And one of the problems, I think, for a lot of iconographers, especially those who have come as amateurs to this, is they look at the garments, they see that they look a bit odd, and there's these sort of lines everywhere, but they're not quite sure why they are where they are. So as a result of which, it all gets a bit lost and it looks odd. And therefore, if it looks even odder when you've done it, then it must be better. And that's actually not the case. It has to look odd in the right way. And that's where you need the skill to understand what you're trying to do. And the beginning of that is to understand the anatomy beneath. If you don't get that right, then you end up with proportions that are wrong, the relationships between part of the body are wrong, and that becomes highly distracting when you're trying to pray. Remember, the icon is there as a service to the liturgy of the church, to the prayer of the people of God, the communion between God and us. And therefore, you don't want anything that's going to distract from that. So the first thing that I do when I'm looking at a model, the first thing I want to do is to understand what's underneath the garments. Train yourself to look beneath the surface, because if you can see what's underneath, you can then recreate that skeleton, as it were, and then put the clothing around it. And even if you're not quite right, it's still going to make sense. And if there are bits which you're not really sure what's happening, especially if it's an old icon that's been damaged, this will give you a way of understanding what's missing and being able to put it in convincingly. So you can see I've done a little exercise with those three, and the red lines represent the skeleton. And if you look at the one in the middle there, the most obvious thing are the kneecaps, because you usually get these real sort of bright areas with the sort of rounded bottom. So you can start by putting your knees in, and notice that this one here is higher up than this one. So this leg is going down and this is going out. And you know from your bit of basic biology, if you've ever looked at one of those skeletons, how the bones of the leg don't meet together in a point. They have a harness, as it were, called the pelvis. So they go to the pelvis, and then there's basically a bar between the two limbs. And in the middle of that is the spine. So I put that bar in there to hint at the pelvis. And then about halfway through there, you can see that red line coming up and curving round up into the neck. Now, once you've got your skeleton and then the arms here, once you've got that, you've got to then put the muscles and the fat and the skin, which create a much softer, rounder areas, onto the skeleton. So in green, I've put a thigh here and a thigh there. And here's a calf muscle, here's a calf muscle. And then this muscle and skin getting thinner and thinner as it goes down towards the ankle, where you've just basically got bone and sinews and skin. And then notice here, you've got the stomach coming out. So it's coming up into the groin. There you've got the stomach coming up into the chest. Otherwise, this big mass here, go back up here, you see it looks so big and bulky, and you might be thinking, well, why the heck's it like that? It doesn't look right. But actually, when you think about what's underneath, it does make sense. And once you see that, you can see what we're going to do with the garments going round it. So there's some, I've done the same thing here and the same thing here. So I want to then think about, okay, so you've got your skeleton and your body mass. What happens when you put cloth around that? And I've done a little diagram here to show you the basic principles of what's happening. So basically, if I've got the light bulb like this, and I put this over the top, you can see how all the creases are coming to the point. And that tells me that underneath here is a sharp point. If I use the rounded, you can see the shape is shown by where those creases stop. And this is where a lot of people get really confused, because if you're doing an arm, if I put this over here like this, you can see that there's here especially is quite a sharp point where the bone is, but here there's more of a mass. And can you see here where those creases are falling from? You've got a sort of gap up here of a smooth area, and then they're hanging from here, whereas here they're hanging almost from here because it's thinner and a sharper shape. So when it comes to doing the garments in the icon, you've got push points and pull points. You've got the pull of gravity, and you've got the push or the resistance of the body mass. So if I go back to the, you see the leg area here, where I've got those blue lines. The blue line is the body mass, as it were, pushing up against the cloth. Gravity is obviously pulling it down, but then there's something else happening here. And that's the cloth is being pulled between 2 or 3 points. So there's this point here by the waist as it's going round over the hip and under the, as it were, the wrap here. And then there's the knee. So it's sort of pulled here and pulled there and then pushed up by the mass of the thigh. And it's the combination of those forces that will give you the direction of your folds. So if you can understand where the pull points are, at least, you can begin to make sense of it. If you don't understand that, you're going to be all over the place. So I'm going to now play you a little video where I'm going to actually demonstrate drawing this. Can you see on the left-hand side, there is the angel.
Yes.
And you see the red lines that I put on the top of it. That's your basic skeleton. So the first thing to do when you're looking at an example or a model you're wanting to follow is to look underneath the garment and work out what's the basic body structure. So first of all, you've got your skeleton, and the easiest thing to look at is the knees, because the knees are always clear. And the arm, you can see the top of the arm quite easily. And then you can see the top of the legs, the bone structure there. Say, for example, at the bottom of the legs, where it goes from the knee to the foot, on the right-hand side, you can very clearly see how that's working. So it's worth just sketching that in to start with. And then think of the body mass. So you've got the legs, which are made up of muscle, maybe a bit of fat, and skin. And whereas the bones make quite a sharp, thin edge, the muscle structure really spans out. And you think about your thighs, those of you who go to the gym, and might see all those bodybuilders, you know, doing all their workouts and stuff. You see them make the way their thighs really mass up. And they create a sort of rounded shape. So here, you can see how that thigh, I've drawn it in green, where the sort of muscle mass of the thighs are, muscle mass of the calf, same on the arms. Now, perhaps the most difficult thing to work out is the thorax, the tummy and the chest. And if you look here, once I've got the legs in position, I put the hip, the pelvis in just as a red line, and then the back coming up and curving up into the neck. Now, once you've got that, you're in a position to work out where the stomach is. And the stomach's quite important because it is quite a big, well, in some of us, it's a very big mass. But it does make a definite impact on the figure. So if you can see that, then you're beginning. So the red lines, that's your skeleton. And then the green lines are your body mass. And the clothing is going to be pulled around that construct. So if you see what I'm actually drawing at this point is that skeleton, and then I'm going to bulk it up. So let's just watch the next part. So there's those lines, getting the proportions right, the angles right, putting in the masses for the body. So you see how I've done that. By the way, the drawing was on a drawing shelf, so it's on a slightly different angle. So the legs appear a little shorter than actually I was drawing them. So it's just to explain that. So can you see I've actually created, first of all, a body, which I'm going to dress. And this is how I always do it when I'm drawing figures, so that I can really get a good balanced construction, which isn't going to be distracting. Okay, so the first thing is getting your proportions right and your posture. Now, let me just, so I'm getting that sleeve in, 2 sleeves, and then that. Now, what I'm doing now is that pull point at the bottom around the calf, it doesn't just stop, it goes round the calf muscle. So you've got to show that when you're drawing it. And I did it with just a diagonal line that just sort of takes the pull line a little bit round and up. You see that? Do you see my mouse when I put it over?
Yes.
Okay, so if I do this, you see here where that I put that line in there.
Yes.
So this is pulling down from the shin here. It's coming down, and then there's that round calf. So it's coming to where the round bit of the calf is, and then giving that little line across and then going up around it. So the cloth is going round the ankle, not just simply stopping. If it just stopped, it would suggest that there was no leg underneath, or that it was like a matchstick. If it's thicker, then the cloth has got to be shown to be going around it. So we'll just continue for a minute. So I'm emphasizing that. And now I'm beginning to put in the other major folds. So the basic pull in this particular area is between that upper thigh on the right hand side and the ankle of the bottom of the shin of the left side leg. But it doesn't all go to that one point. There's the cloth bulks out and stretches out between the two legs. So as a result of which the lines are radiating from one side up to the other. So we've got the pull points. So it's the pull at the bottom, and then it's pulling up over the thigh. And the mass of the thigh, those big muscles, is creating a wide area at the top. So do you see where the pencil is at the moment? Notice these lines here go across and then down. If I'd have made it just shorter, it would have suggested that there was no muscle underneath, it was just bone. So I've got to make them wide enough until the line comes down to show the mass of the muscle. Now with the sleeve, you can see we've got two parts of the arm. You've got the lower arm and the upper arm, and then it's not just straight out and then hanging straight down. It's bent. So this is coming down this way, and then this is going out and slightly up that way. And so the cloth has to do something where it meets. So you've got to make sure you've got your arm where the arm meets in the right place, and then arrange the cloth around that sink point. So if you notice the sleeve where it's at the cuff is coming down and in and pulling to where the garment pulls into the cummerbund. So that's a pull point there, but it's not pulled really taut like between the legs. It's sagging a bit, so it's on a bit of a curve, but we don't want it to look sensual, so it's quite angular. So there's that sweep down, gravity pulling it down, that bit of volume, and then likewise from the shoulder, that's being pulled down by gravity and then resolving itself as it meets where the cloth sweeps into the cummerbund. I'm working that cummerbund, bringing it down and round. Notice I'm now making the certain lines stronger, and I'm beginning to refine exactly where those creases go. So at the beginning, very loose, and then get more and more precise with how the garment is working. But again, don't be too worried about making too precise lines. You can refine those later. Okay. Now, what I've done here is I've now taken a piece of tracing paper, put it over the top, so I can refine my drawing without having to rub everything else out that I've started with. I've partly done that so it's easier for you to see what I'm doing. But it's not a bad method in any case. If you want to be able to be free when you start off with your sketching and then be able to move on quite rapidly based on the work that you've done. And especially when you're learning, this is a really good way to be able to correct your work. So do your loose thing first, get that right, and then put a piece of tracing paper over the top, and then try and refine it and see how that goes. So you can see the stages of your work as you progress, and you can begin to understand where you might have gone wrong. So for example, you might have got your proportions wrong in your initial sketch. So if you got the proportions wrong, it doesn't matter how good your later resolving of the folds is, it's not going to look right. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't correct their work as they're going along at the right stage. And so the effect is they put all this work in and then end up in a real mess, because by the time they get this, the ankle is still in the wrong place, and that's affected everything else. So now I'm working in particular areas and giving a little bit of attention to how lines curve. If you've got a round muscle underneath, you need to have a slightly curved line. So you see, for example, here on that thigh, originally the way I just did a straight line. Okay, so it's basically pulling from the right points, but I'm now sagging it slightly and then bringing it up and then over and down. So it's going over that thigh muscle, and that slight curve gives the sense that there is this round muscle shape underneath. Okay. Again, where it resolves, pay attention to how the folds work. And if you're working from a model, this is a good way to learn that. So you focus then at where those lines resolve themselves and how. So, for example, you see how it's coming up over the top of that leg, and there's a sort of little triangle. And notice the shapes of the folds come in lots of little triangles. So they're like arrow shapes, and that helps create movement within the composition. It takes your eye on a journey, and it helps resolve everything. Okay. Now we're on our last 3 minutes. It's amazing how quickly it goes, isn't it? Maybe I shall invest in the full version, and then we could have longer. But so can you see here that arrow shape? That arrow shape. You see there where my mouth is? So it's coming over the shoulder and it radiates out in those lines, but they form into like arrows. Comes up, comes up, comes up, over and round. If we look here, you see there is an arrow shape. And as this resolves itself, you'll see that there'll be more arrow shapes in here as well. Now the bottom bit here is a little complex. We'll deal with that maybe separately next week. Show you how to do those folds, because those are quite classic iconographic folds. There we are. So you see how it's got those, this line coming up and then going over the top, this coming at the parallel angle. So that creates, those lines all relate to each other. Here's the knee, and it's pulling round the knee, but not from a single point, but around the knee. So it's got that sense of the mass, it's got that round shape that you would typically have with your knee, and then it's resolving itself by coming around here, but the folds are sort of breaking out and then blending up where that mass